What up, what up, what up? Welcome back to the channel. That was stupid. Alright, boys and girls. Welcome back to the channel. Got some stuff in the mail today, which is going to start off this video. Give you a little rundown of what's happened. Back in May, we took the car to PFI Speed to do some dyno work, some tuning, and to test the car out since I haven't drove it in like 4 years. Probably longer than that. It's probably been like 5 years since I've attempted to drive the car. Anyways, broke the transmission, multiple spots, multiple pieces. The differential being one of them. We tore it up pretty good. And we broke a axle. And the transmission case was a little iffy, so I got another case, or at least the rear half of the case. But today, we got a little something from Speed Factory. Boom. We opted for the wave track. Originally I was going to buy the wave track, but they were on back order. So then I opted for an M factory, and I ordered the wrong one, so I sent it back. And then the M factories were on back order, so then I upgraded back to a wave track. So I guess that was kind of a good thing. But I'm gonna open this bad boy up and see what this thing looks like. Wave track versus Quaif. Alright, so we know this one fits the Quaif. Oh boy, we're there. Awesome. I do need to go get a tool to get the speedo gear off to get it put on this diff, and then I have new diff bearings, new ring gear bolts and everything ready to go. So yeah, we're getting there. This is gonna get us back on the road. Sweet. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to run to the parts store so I can get a clamshell or whatever you want to call it, so I can put this in. Anyways, I'm gonna run to the store, grab a tool, and I'll show you how to get this ring gear, or this good golly. I'm gonna run up to the parts store, grab a tool, show you how to get this speedo gear off, and then we'll get the bearings pressed on. Then we can try and fit this in the case and see about setting up the what's the word I'm looking for? Diff spacing or diff something? Yeah, anyways, we'll be back. Alright guys, so it has been a couple more days. I searched all over God's creation for a clamshell. Alright, so my battery just died there. I searched all over God's creation the last couple days trying to find a clamshell. Had to drive a couple hours over. I got it. I'm gonna move my stuff out over here. Maybe. And you can see I've got the clamshell placed right underneath this VSS gear. So I'm gonna take it over to the press, sit this in the press. I'm gonna push right here on the diff and try and push it right out of the bottom. I'm not even gonna take this bearing off because it should go around the bearing pretty easy. All right, and just like that, I pressed this right out the bottom, and the speedo gear came right off. So, and I should have marked it. I don't think it matters which way it goes on, because, yeah, from the looks of it, it doesn't look like it matters. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So now we need to put it on here. It looks like we should just be able to tap it on there. Maybe I'll get a little brass hammer or something and try and tap it on. Lord help me if I break this. Yeah, so next is I need to pull all this back out. I bought brand new Honda ring gear bolts. That's the part number. What is that? 90017689000. I've seen guys heat them up, take them out. I wouldn't do that. Those things stretch, and for the cost of new bolts, I don't remember what I paid for the bolts, but for the cost of new bolts, you might as well just put new ones in it. But I'm gonna get some blue Loctite, and then we're gonna torque these down 75 foot-pounds. We'll throw them in the vise and we'll get these torqued, and then we can start pressing the new diff bearings on, and then from there we'll check our diff clearance, and maybe we can get this train back together. And just so you know, you can see on the head of these bolts, they show the arrow going counterclockwise, because that's the way you go to tighten it. So if you ever have to take one of these apart, that doesn't mean loosen it up, that means tighten it that direction, because these are left-handed thread. So righty loosey, lefty tighty. We're going to clamp this in the vise, but we're going to clamp it in between two pieces of aluminum, so we don't mess up this ring gear. Alright, and since I'm not going to be able to get to like these bottom ones, as I torque these, and I'm going to torque them kind of in a star pattern, as I torque them I'm going to paint marker them so I know that I've already torqued them. And it's kind of like whenever I build engines, I do the same thing. I got to find my torque wrench. I think it's in the other shop. Oh yeah, it fits. All right, now I can start torquing these. Don't mind Beat Street. I'm gonna get this torqued to 75 foot-pounds. Like I said, I'll paint marker them as soon as I get them done. And then that way, whenever I pull it out, and I can clock it to get to those bottom two bolts. And then we're gonna start measuring inside the case. All right, so trying to press these bearings on. I already got this one pressed on. It took me a little while because I had to find a process to do with this. So basically I got a bearing installer or seal installer here, and it'll only go down so far before it hits the top of this part of this like shoulder of the diff. So we'll push this down on here, and then it'll stop. Right there it stops. So I don't have a socket or any. My camera just shuts off on its own. But now this is an old wheel bearing It's the only thing that I've got that's big enough that'll fit on the inside of this bearing here, but then we'll go over the snout of that diff there. So we'll set it up like that, drop that down inside of it like there. I mean, if you ain't got the tools, you just make do. So now we'll go down here, press this on, make sure it's even, and then just slowly. Is that it? Oh, wow. I guess that was it. It was more exaggerated on the other side. It looks like it's bottomed out from what I can tell. And then if you look at this side, you can see like that snout sticks out, so I had to have something, let's see right here, that would fit over that. And that's what that did, and it fit right there. Perfect. That way I wasn't pressing on the ball bearing side of it, I was just pushing on this inner race, or whatever you want to call it. But anyways, got that on. Now we can throw that in the case and measure diff clearance, and then we can put the tranny back together for the Civic. Alright, let's do this. Play in the background.
Oh, Nick.
Oh boy.
Oh, jeez.
He's not supposed to be here.
He's going home now.
Alright, we got the diff in the case. I gotta bolt this down so I can check the diff side clearance, or whatever you want to call it. So I can get the feeler gauges out, bolt this down, measure that. If that's good, then we should be able to throw everything in it, bolt it back together, stick it back in there. I'm gonna get this tightened up, we'll check it. Alright, so the diff's in it. I ended up getting a new rear housing for the tranny because there was a couple issues with the old one that I wasn't real fond of. Mainly this piece here where the shift change holder goes into is kind of wallered out, and then there's a couple spots where I thought I saw like a crack right above that. It didn't seem like it ever leaked, but I mean, it is what it is. But so I opted for a new case. But with that being said, this case actually had a 45 thou shim in it. So I took the shim out, and I'm gonna put this back together with just the diff in the bell housing, measure my clearance, and see what they were getting for diff clearance or thrust or whatever you want to call it. And then that way when I go back together with this, I'll have an idea of what they were shooting for. I know what stock spec is, and stock spec's up to like, it's 0 to 0.1 millimeters, which puts you right about 4 thou. But I want to see what G-force setup in this transmission. So I'm going to check that real quick, and then we'll end up, factory has a shim here for the diff, and they actually have a shim up here on the main shaft. I think it's main shaft, input shaft. What input shaft? I'm gonna call it input shaft. But they actually have a shim on there too. But when G-force built this, it didn't have a shim in it. Like when I got it back, took it apart, there was no shim there. So I need to check and measure thrust on the main shaft here. So once I get this checked, then I'll pull the diff out and then bolt it together with the gear stack in it, and then measure thrust from the tip of the input shaft here. And then that way, whenever I go back together with the new rear half of the case, I'll know where I need to be as far as clearance goes. So let's put this on, and then we'll measure our diff clearance. We're gonna shove this in here and see what we get for clearance. That one's pretty snug too. got 54 there, and that had a 45 thou shim in it. So that's gonna give me like 9 thou thrust with this diff, but I didn't measure it before with the old diff and bearing. So there may be a bearing difference. So this might be completely irrelevant as far as the diff goes, but we are gonna put it together with the main shaft and everything in it and measure main shaft thrust or input shaft thrust, whatever you want to call it, and see what they set it up to. And then that way when we go together with the new rear half of the case, it may be different, so we may need to add a shim to that where this one didn't have one. So I'm gonna get my mess cleaned up, get a little more organized here, and then we'll come back and we'll check that main shaft thrust. It's gonna storm. All right, so we're back at it. I've got the main shaft, the counter shaft in the trans, and I got a few bolts started. I'm gonna snug those up, and then I can check, I can tighten those up and then see where, so this, let me back up just a little bit. This transmission got built by G-Force when I first got my dogbox. So now I'm curious, I want to bolt all this back together with the way they had it. Mind you, it doesn't have a diff in it or nothing like that. It's just a counter shaft and main shaft in it in the same case that they built it in. I want to measure to see how much main shaft thrust it has in and out, to see what they were, obviously what clearance they were looking for or what they were using for clearance. And this case didn't have a shim back here, so once I measure this and get an idea how much main shaft clearance or thrust they had, then I'll know what to shoot for whenever I change this rear section out from my new rear section, because this one was pretty messed up inside where the shift change holder and stuff bolted into. I showed it earlier in the video. But so I'm gonna snug this up, flip it over, and then see if I can find a way to measure it with a dial indicator, and then we'll know what we're going for. All right, so I've been kind of sitting here wrestling with this thing. I kind of got some hodgepodge thing made. There's an actual tool that's made to go on this that like clamps around this gear, and then you lay a piece of like flat stock here, and it's got a threaded hole, and you basically thread a bolt in it, and with this piece of aluminum clamped onto this and the bolt going through it, you basically are kind of like pulling up on it manually with the bolt. I don't have that tool, and it's like $200. So I was trying to set this up like this, and then don't do this at home, this is a bad idea, but I was just curious to get a rough idea. I was trying to like pry on the bottom of this main shaft just to see if there was any movement in the dial indicator or in the main shaft to the dial indicator here, and I'm physically getting no main thrust. So I'm gonna have to call G-Force, see what they recommend, or if I'm doing something wrong. I'm not a transmission specialist or a specialist at anything, but something about this doesn't seem right. I did set all this up with the original rear half of the case that they had assembled it with, and it was the same thing. I got no thrust whatsoever in the main shaft, and OEM Honda specs like 4 to 7 thou. Granted, this isn't OEM Honda transmission, other than the case is Honda. I don't know what they recommend, so I'm gonna have to call them, see what the deal is, and then see if we can come back and, you know, on another day and sort all this out. But nonetheless, you saw how we checked the differential for side clearance, or, you know, differential thrust, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know, but I don't know if this was very helpful. This was probably more of a mind screw than anything, but I guess we'll end this off here and have to come back to this another day. This car drives me insane. Every time I turn around, something like this comes up, and you know, it's just this is why I've gone back to rear-wheel drive stuff, because this front-wheel drive stuff, it's just a headache. It's overpriced, entirely too expensive for what it is. It's got half of everything that a V8 has. You know, it's got 4 less cylinders, you know, 4 less pistons, 4 less rods. You know, it's just half the injector. You know, it's just, this thing is way more fun than this thing's ever been. This thing just drives me bonkers. But we're gonna get it fixed, and then we're gonna take it out and test it and try and run 8s with it, and then I'll be happy with it, and then I won't complain about it no more. But we're gonna end it off here, guys. Thanks for watching. Keep following along. Hopefully some of this video was informational for somebody trying to do something similar to this. Be a lot easier if this was all OEM Honda transmission stuff. Wouldn't be a problem. But since it's not, and it's a G-Force dog box, of course, and it's mine, it's going to cause tons of problems. But don't forget, comment, like, subscribe, hit the bell, get all the notifications, and then like make sure you hit the little bell thing next to it and hit all, so you get all the notifications, not just some of them. And we'll see you guys on the next one.